He left me standing in the church after 12 years together and 4 hours waiting in my dress. When he finally showed up drunk saying he didn't know if I was the one, I took off my dress right there and went to the honeymoon alone. What happened on that trip changed everything. There are moments that divide your life in two, the before and the after. Not gradually, not with a smooth transition where you can adapt while the change happens, but suddenly, with the precision of something that falls and breaks and can never be what it was before it fell. My before ended on a Saturday in September at noon. I was standing in the vestibule of a church in a dress that had taken 7 months to choose, with 200 people sitting on the other side of that door waiting for the music to start, and with a groom who was not arriving. My after started in that same moment. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Natalia. I am 38 years old. I am a university professor of contemporary literature, and for 12 years, I was the girlfriend, the fiancée, the almost wife of a man named Sebastián. 12 years. So you have a sense of what that means. When Sebastián and I started dating, I was 26 years old, had just finished my master's degree, lived in a shared apartment with 2 friends, and believed with the unshaded certainty of someone who has not yet lived enough that love was primarily a matter of finding the right person. 12 years later, I was 38, had a doctorate, an academic position I had built with sustained work, and the same person by my side who had been there from the beginning. Sebastián was my constant. He was the person I talked to when something went well and when something went wrong. He was the person I had lived with in 3 different cities for work reasons, first mine and then his. He was the person with whom I had made every important decision of my adult life. Or so I believed. The wedding was not an easy decision to reach. Not because I did not want to marry him, but because Sebastián had a complicated relationship with formal commitment that for years I had interpreted as his way of processing things at his own pace, and that in retrospect, with the brutal clarity that time gives, was something more. We had talked about getting married since year 5 of the relationship. We had had that conversation 20 times. We had reached agreement, set a date, canceled once 2 years earlier because Sebastián said he was not ready, gone to couples therapy, and come to agreement again. The new date was that Saturday in September. 200 people, church, reception, honeymoon booked in Portugal, which was the country we had both wanted to visit together since we were new in our relationship, and that we had saved for this moment. Everything paid, everything confirmed, everything ready. The morning of the wedding I was calm, not with the forced calm of someone who is suppressing something, with the real tranquility of someone who after 12 years and 1 cancellation and therapy and 1,000 conversations has arrived at the day she always waited for and feels it arrived legitimately. I got ready with my mom and my best friend Elena. I put on a dress. We went to the church. I waited. The priest started getting nervous at 40 minutes. I told him it would be soon, that it was surely traffic, that he was on his way. My mom was looking at me with an expression I did not want to read, because reading it meant accepting what the expression was saying. Elena had her phone in her hand and was checking it with the frequency of someone monitoring something she does not want me to see. At 2 hours, Sebastián's father came into the vestibule with a face that said everything before he opened his mouth. He told me Sebastián was fine, that he had been located, that they were talking to him. I asked him where he was. He paused. At a bar 6 blocks from a church. What I felt in that moment was not what people usually imagine you feel in that situation. It was not immediate rage. It was not tears. It was not collapse. It was a strange and cold kind of clarity. Like when you're looking at a problem, and suddenly you see the solution with a sharpness that makes you wonder why you had not seen it before. I asked Sebastián's father to call him, and pass me the phone. He passed it to me. Sebastián was drunk. Not in the functional way that someone who has had too much can still hold a coherent conversation. Really drunk. With that voice that becomes slower and more honest than it would want to be because the filter between what you think and what you say stops working. He told me he was sorry, that he loved me, that he did not know what was happening to him. I told him to explain what was happening to him. And then he said the thing I cannot forget even though 4 years have passed. He said he'd spent weeks unable to stop asking himself whether I was the right person. Whether after 12 years the fact that he was still asking himself that question meant something. Whether the fear he was feeling was the normal fear that everyone feels before getting married, or whether it was something more. He said he did not know if I was the one. 12 years. Dress on. 200 people in the church. And Sebastián in a bar 6 blocks away wondering if I was the one. I told him one thing. I told him he had 1 hour to get to the church. That if he arrived in that time and in a state to have a real conversation about what was happening, we would have it. That if he did not arrive, we already had the answer to his question. I hung up. I handed the phone back to Sebastián's father. I went into the vestibule bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment, and I made the clearest decision I have made in my adult life. I came out of the bathroom and asked Elena to help me with the buttons on the dress. She looked at me without understanding. I told her to help me with the buttons. She helped me. I took off the dress in the church vestibule. I put on the clothes Elena had brought for the after party, a pair of jeans and a blouse and sneakers, which were in the bag we had left in the car because we were going to change later. I gave the dress to my mom. I asked Elena to announce to the guests that the wedding was not going to take place and that I thanked them for their presence and understanding. And I left. I went directly to the airport. The flight to Lisbon left that night at 10. It was booked in both our names, but it was an electronic ticket on my phone, and I had the passport. I sat in an airport cafe with a coffee and my phone off for 3 hours. I boarded the plane, and I went to my honeymoon alone. The 10 days in Portugal are the 10 most important days of my adult life. Not because they were perfect. The first 2 days, I cried in a way I had no way of stopping. That crying that is not only about what just happened, but about everything accumulated over 12 years that suddenly found its exit. I cried for the version of me who had waited 40 minutes in that vestibule, convincing herself it was traffic. I cried for the years I had interpreted Sebastián's doubts as his way of processing things rather than as what they were. I cried for the 12 years I could have invested in another direction. And then on the third day, I stopped crying. Not because I had finished processing, but because Portugal was beautiful and I was there, and I was also there, and that was real regardless of everything else. I visited everything we had planned to visit together. The Alfama, Sintra, the Alentejo, the coast. The restaurants we had marked on the shared map that had gone in use for 2 years because we always postponed the trip until after the wedding. I saw all of it alone, and I discovered something I did not expect to discover. That I liked my own company. That in 12 years of relationship, I had lost the habit of being with myself, and that recovering it, even under the circumstances, felt like recovering something I should never have lost. Sebastián tried to contact me 14 times during those 10 days. Messages, missed calls, emails. Some were apologies. Some were explanations that changed version between one message and the next. One, on the third day, said he had arrived at the church 20 minutes after I left, and that if I had stayed a little longer, he would have made it. I read it twice and archived it without responding, because the problem was never whether he arrived or not. The problem was that after 12 years, he was still asking himself whether I was the right person. And that problem is not solved by arriving 20 minutes late to a church. I came back from Portugal different. I did not know exactly how to explain it. It was not that everything had been resolved. It was not that the pain had disappeared. It was that something in me knew with a clarity I had not had before that what happened that Saturday, as much as it hurt, was better than the alternative. The alternative was having married someone who was wondering whether I was the one. That, in some sense that takes time to process, but that eventually feels like truth, was a gift with an absolutely terrible wrapping. Sebastián and I had one conversation when I got back. Just one. Long, honest in a way our conversations had rarely been in recent years, because in recent years we had been so busy getting to the wedding that we had stopped saying the things that were difficult to say. He told me what he had done was unforgivable and that he knew it. I told him it was not a question of whether it was forgivable or not. It was a question of the fact that the question he had asked himself in that bar, whether I was the right person, was a legitimate question that deserved an honest answer. And that the honest answer, given everything that had happened, was probably that no. Not because I was not enough, but because someone who, after 12 years, still asks himself that question at that level of doubt probably needs to find the person with whom he does not ask it. And that person was not me. We said goodbye, without drama, with the real sadness of two people who genuinely loved each other for a long time and who are acknowledging that that time has ended. For years have passed. Sebastián is, from what I know through mutual friends, in a serious relationship with someone he met a year after what happened. I hope with her he does not ask himself the question. I genuinely hope so. Not with cynicism. With the real wish of someone who wants the people who mattered in her life to be, well, even if they are no longer part of it. I am well in a way I would not have been able to imagine that Saturday, in September, standing in the church vestibule. I have my work that I love. I have Elena and my mom and the people who were in that vestibule and who loved me the same in jeans and sneakers as in the 7-month dress. And I have something that over 12 years of relationship I have been slowly losing without noticing. I have myself. That turned out to be enough. More than enough. If this story reached you, comment. Would you have waited or left the same way? Like if you think going to the honeymoon alone was the right decision. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who needs to remember that sometimes what seems like the worst day turns out to be the beginning of something better. Reflection to take with you. People show you who they are in moments of maximum pressure, not on the easy days, on the days when the decision costs something. Pay attention to those moments. They're the most honest of all.